to speak every week, so they're more than willing to hear someone else, so that's good. Although I know they all love me, right? Yes. So we're good. We're loving this. And what a powerful song, Daniel Nahmad, and that idea of one power, one mind, one love. The message this week is using the mind of God. And in the reading of today's Science of Mind magazine, the author was speaking about one of the teachers that she had, that the teacher always used to say that the mind that I'm using is the mind of God. And that's the philosophy that we have here in this teaching of Science of Mind, is that there is only one mind, and it's the mind of God. It is the mind that is individualizing itself in each and every one of us through our personality, through our thoughts and our words and our actions. And so whatever it is that we are thinking, whatever we're generating, it's coming out of that mind of God. And in that place, it's whole, perfect, and complete. But the way in which we use it is how it gets confused and how it gets misinterpreted, how it gets misconstructed into something that looks like the fear and the hate and the lack and the limitation that goes on in the conditions of our life. But if we take the opportunity to reconnect, to bring ourselves back into that awareness that we are using the mind of God, we're using that power of good, and that if we can bring ourselves into agreement, into alignment with that power, then we will bring forth a greater condition into the experience of our life. There's a reading in that same section that Reverend Ann was using this morning out of the Science of Mind magazine, in that chapter called The Principles of Successful Living. I wanted to read this one paragraph that Ernest Holmes gives us, and I think it really is very succinct about what is this teaching of Science of Mind. We do not teach that you can get what you want. If we could all get what we want, it might be disastrous. For it is certain that most of us would want things that would interfere with the well-being of someone else. That this idea that we would want so much that we would disregard the concern or the well-being of others around us or others in the world. And I am so sensitive to that in this time that we are living in the world today, that because there is such a great want and need by individuals, without the concern of all others that they are causing. They are part of the cause of that energy that is creating the lack and the limitation and the fear and the hate and so much other disastrous things that are going on in the world, because of their wanting, they're only concerned about their own self and their own well-being. That if we are truly going to be a part of this greater community of humankind and living in the world, living in the universe, then we need to be opening up into more acceptance and more kindness and more love and more sharing. Truly, we live in an abundant universe. There is everything that we could ever possibly want or ever possibly need. But we can't be hoarding it, and we can't be greedy about it. That we need to be able to be in that place that we're more open and more sharing and working with each other. There are three points that I want to focus on today, and one of those is that we cultivate a connection with ourself. We cultivate a connection with ourself, that we develop our spiritual muscle, and that we become open to receiving our good. So these are some of the basic tenets of Science of Mind This is the philosophy that Ernest Holmes is bringing forth, and it's coming out of, and it's not that we're the only ones. I mean, it shows up in every faith, in every tradition, in every culture, in every tribe, every human that is showing up has these aspects to it. Ernest Holmes was just bringing it about in a way, in a teaching that he thought would make sense in his time, and I think it still makes sense in our time. That if we can spend a little bit of our time in our life and our daily experience to connect with ourself. And when I say self, I'm talking about our higher self. I'm talking about the essence of who we truly are. Because if there is only one life, then this life that we're living is a life that has been given out of that essence of the divine, out of that essence of spirit, out of that oneness and that wholeness. And it's showing up in the individual personalities of who we are. So the essence that is dwelling within us, that higher self, that wholeness, is already whole, perfect, and complete, and it's allowing for us to play with it, to have free will with it. So we get to show up in this life, in this experience of what we call ourselves, as I call myself as Michael, and I get to show up in this life being my free self, taking this power that says that I have a creative power within me, and I get to choose how it's going to show up. So the conditions of my life are influenced and energized by the way in which I'm using that creative power. I'm using my mind, I'm using my thoughts. And so I am forever in this practice of wanting to influence the conditions of my life in the best way that I possibly can. And I've been in those situations where it has been disastrous, it's been tragedy, and it's been absolutely horrendous. And when I entered into this philosophy and this teaching of science of mind, I found that there was a way in which I could have that choice. I didn't have to live in my victimhood. And for years, I was forever a victim. Maybe it was growing up Catholic and, the guilt that the nuns gave to me. But in some way, I bought into that. And I was very much a part of that. And when I entered into Science of Mind, they offered me an opportunity to choose again. So I began to reflect upon what was going on in the back of my mind, what was the thoughts that I was carrying, and realized that I could change those things. So that's what's being offered for us here, is an opportunity to reconnect again to that higher self that dwells within us, to bring about a greater sense of truth and wholeness in our life. And I know that it is true, I know that it works for me, and I know that it works for so many others. And so I just offer that as a way for us to continue to move forward. The second point was about developing our spiritual muscle. And I think we can all agree that we know that in our physical being, that if we're not doing something, if we're not exercising, if we're not walking, if we're not using our physical body, then it begins to move into that place of, how do I say this kindly? It stagnates and it begins to just fall away. And we find ourselves limited physically. And we know that as we go through this aging process, that a lot of that is just the natural way in which it's going to progress. But we have a choice, if we want to do some exercise, to do some physical things that will hold up that muscle and that physical structure for as best as it can be, for as long as it can be, so that we can continue to move about and be active in the world. And the same is true of our spiritual nature, that if we just let that go, if we just start dropping away and not paying attention to our affirmations and our prayers and our thoughts and our attitude, then our moral sense will begin to deteriorate and fall away. So we can develop our spiritual muscle by continuing to do all of those things that we offer here in our teaching of the science of mind. The affirmative prayer, spiritual mind treatment, be reading positive affirmations to bring into your thinking the greatest and highest good that you can possibly imagine. To reach out to each other, to our practitioners, to the readings that we have available. All of those things are ways, the Science of Mind Daily Guide. All of these are things that are tools that can help us develop our spiritual muscle, and it's important. As long as you're here, as long as you're in this existence, I believe that there's a purpose for you. There is a divine purpose for each and every one of us, and we need the strength, we need the spiritual strength in order to continue to move through the challenges that we're going to be faced. And we all know that there are challenges daily that show up in our life. The greater our attitude, the stronger our sense of well-being, the deeper our faith and our spiritual practice, the better we will handle those challenges and able to move through the daily experience that's going to be that shows up in our life if we are developing that spiritual muscle. And the third point that I have today is to become more open to receiving our good. There's only one life. And it's already created all that ever will be, all that ever has been, and all that is right now. It's in that mind of God. That potential is just waiting to be demonstrated and manifested into the experience of which we choose. So if we can open up to this idea that good is already there available, it's already around us. We just have to be able to develop the vision in order to see that. We have to be able to develop the understanding that it's already there. We just need to be able to develop more of how we communicate with our higher self in that divine presence, in that one life, in order to bring that forth and bring it good. We should be living in an attitude of expectancy. I am like eagerly expecting the next moment and the next moment after that, because I know that there is a God within me, there is a presence around me, that there is this good that is already made available, and I'm looking for it. I'm like reaching out for it. I'm opening up my arms. I want to bring it in, because Lord knows I see a lot of that other stuff, that lack and limitation and disease and illness and challenges and heartbreaks and suffering and sorrow. That seems to just be readily falling in front of me all of the time. But I know that there is something greater, there is something more. And every day in which I work through this practice, every day that I work through a different challenge, every time that I show up and be a part of this beloved community, I recognize that there's more good to show up. And it keeps showing up in ways that I've not yet even imagined. It's led me into, when I'm doing my spiritual mind treatment, when I'm trying to do my visioning, when I'm doing my prayer work in order to bring some greater good into my life, I no longer get into trying to do out the details. Because the more I detail it, the more I realize that I'm limiting that power and that presence. I'm saying to God, oh no, I've got a better idea. I've got the perfect one right here. And then realize that once I let that go, that God's got a better plan. That God really knows the infinite, really knows the possibilities, really knows what is whole, perfect, and complete. And I need to just trust into that. So I find that if I just begin to open up and say, I'm wanting some good in this idea of financial arrangements. I'm wanting some greater good in this idea of physical health. I'm wanting some greater good, whatever the cause may be. And I'm trusting that the divine presence is going to bring forth that right and perfect experience and expression in a greater way than I could have imagined. Because I understand that even though my imagination is wild and wacky and way out there sometimes, it's not as far out as God can be. Because God contains the entire universe. Think about that for a moment. A presence that knows everything that has been, knows that everything that is, and knows that everything is going to be, has already set into motion this entire universe, the galaxies and the planets and the stars, and all of that in this divine perfect order. How could I possibly do something even greater than that? So I fall into this presence of practicing and trusting and faithing that God has a greater plan for me and for each and every one of us. But if we can become open to that, if we can become receptive, if we can be living in that eager anticipation that there's about to be something delivered to us in our greater good, that something more imaginable that we could even think of, that we just allow that to come in, then it shows up in miraculous ways, or what appears to us to be miraculous ways. But it's the ordinary for God, that divine presence. It just creates over and over and over again, waiting for us to open up to receive it and use it and enjoy and bask in that good and that greater good. So I know that the mind that I'm using is the mind of God. I want to leave you with a affirmation for today, and if you want, you can copy it out of my journal after service. But here's the affirmation: I am a unique expression of spirit, stepping into life in ever more amazing and wonderful ways. I am a unique expression of spirit, stepping into life in ever more amazing and wonderful ways. I am supported every day in every way. I am supported every day in every way. This is the good that's been promised. This is the presence that is always around us. This is the life that we are living if we are willing to open up and to receive that good and even more than we could ever imagine. So I invite you to step into this life, step into this day, step into this knowing this and this presence that you are supported by that divine presence in every way, in every day. Namaste.